Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I, Sherever Davirwala, Executive International Promotions and Admission Symbiosis Center for International Education, welcome you all for day 3 of Internationalization of Higher Education conference titled Reimagining Internationalization, Blended Education as a Catalyst. I would like to invite Dr. Kavitha Menon, Professor and Head Nutrition and Dietetics Program, SIHS, for health capsule presentation on nutrition to improve immunity.
Thank you. Good evening to all. Just a short presentation to tell you some of the methods that could help to improve your immunity as well as to reduce the risk of infection, because we are facing a grave scenario of second wave of pandemic where majority are getting affected. So we need to protect. Let's do something from nutrition with some nutrition insights. As general measures, eat a variety of healthy foods because it helps you to ensure adequate nutrient availability. Drink boiled and cooled water to prevent infection. Ensure a good dietary pattern to cook food before you consume, and ensure you have salads as well in your diets. Say no to high fat, salt, sugar food to prevent inflammation and resulting fat deposition. So far today, we know the only thing is preventing or prevention of inflammation is the one way that can help us reduce the risk of infection. So all attempts towards that angle. So some tips to improve your immunity: have plenty of beverages. Be choosy about your beverage choice, probably tender coconut water, jeera water, hot spicy soups, turmeric milk, because they provide nutrients that support immunity. Spice up your diet. I'm sure this is an international group I'm speaking to, but a little addition of spices definitely helps. Especially the combination of turmeric and pepper is found to be very beneficial together with garlic and ginger. Add colors to your diet. We request a rainbow diet for you. Have plenty of antioxidants that would help to reduce inflammation, detoxify your system, and building immunity to the system. Have nuts as your snacks. A combination of nuts is something powerful that gives you n number of micronutrients, which otherwise you may not get from your regular diet. Use all these together rather than singly depending on one particular item, because variety is the key to ensure your immunity. Follow a healthy lifestyle together with the tips to improve your immunity. Intermittent fasting is found to be beneficial, so keep your food intake limited to less than 10 hours a day and remain in a fasting condition for the rest of the time. It prevents or it reduces the risk for many of the diseases where inflammation is the baseline process. Sleep adequately, don't deprive your sleep. At least 7 to 8 hours of sleep rejuvenates your body and it reduces the stress and risk for infection. Say no to alcohols and spirits. Drinking is not healthy. It prevents inflammation and reduces the production of toxic substances to enhance the body functions. With all these tips, I leave you towards the session ahead. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation and useful health tips which are required at this pandemic time. As we are moving forward to start the first track of the day, the next academic year, is blended education the best way forward? It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our chair for the session, Professor Dr. Marcus Gonzalez. Dr. Marcus Gonzalez is the Vice Rector for International Policy of the University of Barcelona, Professor of Constitutional Law at the University of Barcelona, Legal Advisor to the Spanish Constitutional Court 2005 to 2010, and a General Director for Immigration, Government of Spain 2010-2011. His key focus of research and teaching includes immigration, trafficking of human beings, constitutional justice, and territorial organization of power. author of numerous publications in his fields. Francesca Tomsi Valentin Award 1999 for research related to constitutional jurisdiction, given by the Spanish Constitutional Court and the Center for Political and Constitutional Studies of the Spanish government. He also has an experience as an international expert of the United Nations Development Programme and the Council of Europe. I would now invite Dr. Marcus to take the session forward.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you to the Symbiosis International and the Association of Universities for the invitation to chair this track of its annual conference. As you know, the title of this track is "The Next Academic Year is Blended Education the Best Way Forward?" I think what we have to discuss in this panel is quite clear. The pandemic has forced all universities to incorporate online and virtual technologies into course delivery. Most of the universities, we did already use online tools before, but I think it's obvious that the coronavirus pandemic has stressed all higher education institutions and placed enormous challenge to all of us. And although we hope that the pandemic will improve in the next months, the need to incorporate online technologies and to foster blended education will heighten as we have realized that internationalization does not need permanent mobility, and that blended learning is a more sustainable and educational model. So in this session, we will analyze the challenges and the opportunities of blended education for the internationalization of our universities. But we will try to do it, at least this was planned, in a more concrete way. This talking about the next academic year. And the questions posed by the organizers are the following. What is the role that virtual exchange programs play in blended education? How do faculties enhance the internationalization of the courses under the current conditions? But I think we can address other questions, such as what is virtual exchange? How does it fit into blended learning? Or how does technology transform education, the way in which we teach and also the way in which students learn? I think these are some of the questions that we will for sure discuss in this track. In order to do so, we have three excellent speakers in this track. I will shortly introduce them. First of all, Professor Dr. Ramgopal Rao. He is since 2016 the director of the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. He has worked also in the IIT Bombay and has a long and brilliant academic career in the field of nanotechnology. His curriculum is vast. I won't go into the details, but he has more than 450 publications. He's inventor of many patents and patent applications. He's founder also of two technology startups in IIT Bombay, and he has been recognized, his work has been recognized with many national and international awards. After his presentation, we will then have the pleasure to hear what Rosie Leon is going to tell us. Rosie Leon, she is Director of Virtual Exchange and Online Learning of DePaul University in Chicago, US. She is involved in an innovative and prestigious virtual exchange program of DePaul University that is called the Global Learning Experience. That is aimed at supporting instructors to structure collaborative international learning experiences through technology. So it will be a pleasure to hear also from your experience at DePaul University. And last but not least, we will have the pleasure to hear Dr. Professor Bardo Fraunholz. He is Director of the Analytics Department of Information Systems and Business Analytics at Deakin University, Australia. This university has a close relationship with India, it has an office in India, has many partnerships with universities in India, also a very important research initiative in India. And the university is also a very long tradition in online. Dr. Fraunholz is Associate Professor in the Department of Information Systems and Business Analytics. He's a vast experience in information systems, in project management, and last but not least, again, he's a very passionate proponent of internationalization and students' mobility. So it will be for sure also a pleasure to take into account his speech. As the organizers have told us, each of the speakers has 10 minutes to deliver his or her presentation. We can do it either with PowerPoint presentation or more conventional presentation. Please, the time is tight, so I will try to keep this 10 minutes. After the three presentations, we will have 15 minutes for Q&As. And finally, 5 minutes to sum up and to close the session. So I will ask you that in the Q&A section that you either raise your hands, use a chat to pose questions, but we'll do this after the presentations. So as I already mentioned, it's an honor to have to give the floor to the first speaker, Professor Dr. Ramgopal Rao. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Marcus. I'm very happy to be with all of you on this occasion. I think the internationalization is something that is beginning to be on top of our agenda right now. In fact, Indian higher education system is going through a major transformation at this point in time. In fact, we just have launched our national education policy, or a new education policy, as we call it. And as per the new education policy, India is saying that by 2035, the higher education gross enrollment ratio will go from the current 25% to 50%, meaning we are almost talking about doubling our intake in our academic institutions. And that is a tall order because India has a large number of higher educational institutions, and doubling that will require a lot of physical infrastructure and a lot of faculty recruitments. And there are many challenges I foresee for doubling the higher education gross enrollment ratio in a matter of 10 to 15 years. And that is where another thing is Indian higher education system is also very heterogeneous. What I talk about IITs will not apply to other institutions or other universities. And with such a heterogeneity which is currently in place in our higher education system, so I think it's always a challenge now. How do we maintain the quality? And if we are doubling the higher education enrollment, then how do we ensure that it is done with proper checks and balances in place? And also, Government of India has a mandate now, has mandated at least many institutions such as ours that in the next few years, now we need to be among the top institutions in the world. Now we are now knocking on the doors of these higher educational rankings. We are getting into the top 100 in engineering. For example, IIT Delhi was ranked 47th in 2019. And but we are trying to improve our institutions. And one thing which is also being said about is at least 20 Indian institutions, universities must be in the top 100 in all the world rankings, not necessarily this ranking or that ranking, but 20 Indian institutions need to be in the top world ranking. And even there, one of the reasons why IITs, despite all the good things that happen, despite IITs being the top institutions, despite government spending so much more money, disproportionately on IITs as compared to universities, one of our biggest challenges when it comes to international rankings is the internationalization. Our campuses have mostly remained Indian faculty teaching Indian students, and that has become the character of these institutions. And we never really had any reason to admit international students. All our examination processes, examination standards, our admission processes, all of them have been over the years, mainly developed keeping in mind the Indian students, because we have a large number of students to educate in the country. So internationalization was never a mandate for us, was never even on our radar until now. But now that the international rankings are becoming important, so we are now, because for example at IIT Delhi, if I see on three parameters, score almost like zero. One is international students. We hardly have 1% students as international students. The second is international faculty. We hardly have any international faculty because the government institutions in India, could not have recruited anyone who is not of Indian origin. And the third thing is the faculty-student ratio. We have been increasing our intake at regular intervals, but we have not been able to recruit enough faculty, again because we are only looking for people of Indian origin in this country until now as faculty. So therefore, even the faculty student ratios have got pretty much skewed against what we need for the rankings. So on these 3 out of 6 parameters, we actually score almost zero right now. The ones like in the research impact, there we score, IIT Delhi scores anywhere upwards from 80 out of 100 on the research impact. On perception and other factors, we score a little bit decently. But therefore internationalization has become very important for us in the changing times, with the public pressure, with the government mandate that 20 Indian institutions need to be among the top 100. So therefore, now the question is, how do we do that? And so it requires, at least for IITs, a complete change in the way we admit students. We have developed our examinations, in such a way that, at IIT Delhi, for example, I mean, even overall in the IIT system, if you see, about 1.3 million students take our examination to, and then of which about 15,000 students get into IIT. So it is 15,000 out of 1.3 million students. Now preparing for these examinations takes almost like 2 to 3 years of intense preparation, and that is too much to expect, for an international student to come to our campuses, or to come to our campuses. A student from, another country spending 2 to 3 years of intense preparation is not going to happen. So therefore, this has always been the challenge at undergraduate level. In IITs particularly, we are not even looking at international students as an option. But one thing where we are definitely seeking international participation is in the PhD programs. All of us, if you look at top IITs right now, we have announced fully funded PhD fellowships. At IIT Delhi, we have announced 500 PhD fellowships which are fully funded for international students. And we are also welcoming international faculty now to come and serve on our campuses. But these are very recent phenomenon. I mean, when I say PhD fellowships which are like available, or international faculty, these are like last 2 to 3 years is when we are taking these steps now. So it will take some more time. But then the COVID came, and because of COVID, again, there are other challenges. So one thing which we are now very seriously considering is, can we offer jointly with top universities worldwide, some of these online certificate programs, online diploma programs. We were again very consciously keeping ourselves away from these online programs in IITs, because we were so quality conscious that, and also secondly, IITs are primarily engineering centric institutions. Engineering centric institution, the lectures you can deliver online, but there is a huge amount of practical aspects, and there is also a lot of peer learning that happens in our campuses, because our campuses are all residential campuses. If I have 10,000 students, 80% of them stay on the campus, 95% of faculty stay on the campus. So it is like a place where everyone stays on the campus, everyone interacts with each other. Now that peer learning part is taken away, and with the online programs. And so therefore, we earlier, our online things were restricted to making available some lectures on YouTube, and anybody could watch them and learn something outside their regular working hours and all of that. But now, because of COVID, we have gone into the online thing in a major way. At IIT Delhi, almost like 1,500 courses have been taught online in just the last 1 year, and which in the normal time would have taken us, almost like 10 years of time. To have such kind of a transformation in such a short time, was all because of the COVID induced sort of issues. But again, now we are asking ourselves that many of these courses are available online. So can we start to offer certificate programs now for anyone in the world who wants to take these programs? So that is one place where Delhi has launched a e-Vidya initiative, and where we are now beginning to give certificates, IIT certificate programs to anyone in the world who takes these courses and who qualifies our examinations. So we are now looking at these proctored examinations online. So that is again one place where we are, struggling. But again, I see that this blended education as a catalyst for internationalization is going to happen. In fact, we are already in discussions with some universities to offer joint diploma programs, which could be completely online in certain areas where you don't have so much of laboratory component. And it is a necessity right now for us, not only from the point of making our campuses international, but also to have a larger outreach, to have an international footprint from the rankings point of view, from expanding our programs. I think things are now changing, and last 1 year we have seen a major transformation. But again, the problem at the government level is, with the heterogeneity that exists in our system, there needs to be some standardization. One concern that everybody has in the country is, if your regular programs are rated as X, then the online programs will be X minus delta X. Now the delta X can vary depending on which university you are talking of and what is the purpose for them to actually be running those online programs. So now how do we ensure some amount of standardization? At the government level, I can tell you, there is a thinking of conducting national level examinations for people who are offering online degree programs, so that you may take online courses from anywhere in the country with any partner in the world. But at the end of the day, for you to be qualified for a certain degree or diploma, you need to qualify a national level test, and that is a standardization through which you can ensure a certain amount of quality. That is a thinking process now, at least in our UGC, which is the University Grants Commission, which manages all the universities in the country. And so these are the ways that we are looking at. And I would now think that a lot more international programs can happen, because all our institutions, some of the top institutions in India, are now beginning to offer certificate and diploma programs online, which, like I said, was not the case earlier. And so we are seeking or looking out for partners in various continents. For this purpose, IIT Delhi has joined hands with University of Queensland in Australia. We have another joint program with NCTU in Taiwan, and we are trying to expand into Europe and North America with right partners. So I think things are happening now. Things will happen. Things will move in the direction, but without compromise on the quality. And in areas, in disciplines where the laboratory component is minimal. And in these programs, I would expect a huge increase in the number of online programs and opportunities for international kind of partnership. So that is one thing which is changing in the country. So to summarize, I think our need now for some of our institutions is mostly, this is all driven by the international rankings in some of these cases, for some of our institutions. In other case, for us also in IITs now, we are looking at this as a financial model for running of our institutions, because government funding for higher education is not as much as one would have liked in this country as a percentage of GDP. The government is also saying, can you generate more resources yourselves? And that is where we are looking at online programs offered jointly with the top institutions worldwide, with Indian institutions as partners, and then earning some revenues out of this, which can help improve the infrastructure and other facilities on the campuses. So these are some of my views on this aspect. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. You tackled already some of the aspects that we will for sure discuss in the track. So the idea that blended education will for sure increase, but that this has many challenges, poses many challenges in terms of quality, of the courses, in terms of examinations, in terms of how to have interactions with students, in terms of funding. So I think we tackle different issues that for sure we'll discuss later on. So now it's my pleasure to introduce, to give the floor to Rosie Leon. She's the director of the Virtual Exchange and Online Learning of the Paul University in Chicago. Please, Rosie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Dr. Gonzalez-Beifos, and a very special thank you to all the wonderful conference organizers from Symbiosis International University, the Association of Indian Universities, and everyone else really who made this event possible. It is an honor to join you today together with my fellow co-presenters, Dr. Rao and Dr. Feinholz, in our session about the next academic year and blended learning. So in my role at DePaul University in Chicago, I'm briefly here to talk about virtual exchange as a pedagogy and how it fits into blended education. I'll cover what virtual exchange is, so we frame the conversation, discuss very important rationales for implementing this type of pedagogy from both a strategic point of view, as well as the point of view of professors and students. And ultimately, that would guide us into how virtual exchange takes part in blended learning in the next year and beyond. So what is virtual exchange? Virtual exchange, or VE for short, you'll hear me use that acronym, is a broad term used in the field of international education, which encompasses various models of collaboration. For the purposes of this presentation, I'll use the term as it most closely aligns with the VE COIL model. So COIL is another fun abbreviation that stands for Collaborative Online International Learning. So the VE COIL model is defined as technology-enabled learning experiences with very clear learning outcomes and deliverables, in which sustained communication and interaction takes place between students, so those could be individuals or groups, who are geographically separated with the support of educators. So the fundamental feature of virtual exchange is that at its core, it involves sustained collaboration among students from different cultural backgrounds. So virtual exchange collaborations, they're obviously technology facilitated at a distance. They can incorporate both synchronous and asynchronous components. They're implemented in existing courses, so there's no need to design a new class from scratch. They're carefully designed by the two professors, could be more professors involved. They typically consist of one shared assignment or project or module, occasionally stretching to an entire class, minimum of 5 weeks long. For us, because we're in 10-week terms, they usually last 6 to 8 weeks. And they're usually assessed separately. So each professor assesses their own students within their class. So there are 3 major components to virtual exchange projects, 3 phases. The first one we call empathy building. So that's the space where students get to know each other at a personal level. Activities in this phase can vary from video introductions or written posts or fun interactive ice-breaking activities, many other ways. The second component is the actual collaborative activities. That's the content focus piece of the collaboration. Regardless of the topics or the disciplines, the content phase is very carefully designed by the instructors and typically involves a series of scaffolded activities where students work together and learn from each other in content-related aspects of the collaboration. So again, careful planning and a balanced approach between the courses involved is crucial for the success of this phase, which usually is the longest phase of the project. Those are at least 5 weeks long. And the third and very important final phase of each virtual exchange project is the reflection component. It's very important to structure opportunities for students to reflect on their experience, allowing them to step away from the content and the deliverables of the project and to process in a facilitated way what that experience meant to them in a personal level within their own course or their own major, their school, or even future career. This component can include written or video reflections, guided synchronous conversations, whether those are in small or large groups, and many other ways. So all 3 components, again, the empathy building where students get to know each other, the content focus phase, and the reflection are carefully co-designed by the instructors involved in the collaboration in order to really find the spaces and the tools and the activities that enable all participants, all students, to make the most of the experience in an equitable way. So why virtual exchange? Why is it important? What are the rationales for doing this at your school or within your own class if you're an instructor? There are many, many rationales. For the sake of time, I'll just pick a few to share with you today. At the institutional or strategic level, virtual exchange offers opportunities, obviously internationalization of the curriculum, many different ways to do that. As a significant portion of the virtual exchange experience is centered on disciplinary content, VE can be implemented in a very broad spectrum of disciplines. Could be in the social sciences to the hard sciences and engineering, from humanities to business, education, you name it, you can do a VE project. They also offer opportunities for internationalization of the campus beyond the classroom. When an institution, for example, engages in a campus-wide implementation of virtual exchange, it's not just the professors and the students who are involved and affected by the initiative. Virtual exchanges often impact professional staff members within the institutions from various areas. They may include faculty development area, information technology staff, and instructional design. All these things involve professionals who traditionally may not engage in the work of internationalization of the campus, but have a crucial role to play when implementing virtual exchange. It's an opportunity for them to grow their competence and skills in an international setting. Another very, very important reason to engage in virtual exchange is equity. So we all know the landscape of physical mobility in higher education students is very complex, and it varies from country to country and region to region. Estimates suggest that the portion of higher education students who can travel globally, they can be globally mobile, is only about 2% due to various obstacles. Some are cost related, some are family obligations, curricular limitations, time constraints, many more. So virtual exchange offers an opportunity to broaden access to international experiences to a variety of students, a larger number of students, overcoming many of these obstacles toward a more equitable portfolio of global learning offerings. So these are a couple of strategic rationales at institutional level. Now, from the professors and the students' point of view, some of the most important rationales are: one, intercultural competence. That comes without saying. Students and professors experience direct contact, communication, collaborative work with peers from different cultural contexts. One. Two, comparative disciplinary perspectives. So in other words, collaborating with peers in different countries and educational systems, which very often provides opportunities for interdisciplinary projects and comparative perspectives. Three, virtual global collaboration skills. I know nowadays we're all very used to the virtual world, but students and professors have an opportunity to acquire perhaps new skills or enhance their existing skills with virtual global collaboration in a multicultural setting. These skills continue to emerge as highly desired by employers and are increasingly more relevant as the entire world experiences virtual remote working conditions as part of our new normal. In addition, a little more specifically to professors, with virtual exchange, there are many opportunities for pedagogical growth, as well as research opportunities for professors, whether it's within their own discipline or within the context of scholarship of teaching and learning. And last but not least, it's very important to highlight that virtual exchange had a very important role in international education way before the pandemic, years before. During the pandemic, the interest dramatically increased. It became very popular. A lot of people heard about it, got interested. A lot of institutions started working toward implementing these type of projects and implementing initiatives that are university-wide at their school to address the need of their students. Post-pandemic, which hopefully won't be long, virtual exchange will continue to be an important pedagogy in our broad portfolio of offerings of global learning opportunities for students across the globe. So I'll end it here, turn it over to our next presenter. Thank you so much.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. You not only described what the e-coil is, but also comment the different components of this pedagogic approach. I think that the reflection component is especially important, but also the creation of this empathy, also how to do it. Maybe later on we can discuss about how does this work in practice, the number of students you need, how this works better. It's a big challenge. But I think it was also your comments on the advantages towards internationalization, and especially I would call it the democratic component of this e-coil approach, and that just offers the opportunity to internalize to people that normally doesn't have it, and also more the internal dimension, how this affects not only teaching and learning, but also the organization of our universities. Everything has to be changed. So thank you very much. And we can move on to the next presentation, the last one of Dr. Paolo Frampos. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Gonzalez, and thank you to Symbiosis for the invitation and to the audience for your interest in my presentation or our presentation tonight. I would like to take you on a journey and provide an Australian perspective on blended education as we've experienced it over the last year and where we are heading for the next year, and also with a particular focus on internationalization. Just to give a uniquely Australian introduction, in Australia, of course, internationalization is a big component of what we do at universities generally, and internationalization is not defined as international students per se, but it's actually about the curriculum and the exposure of students in the context of the education to international principles and experiences. And if I go back to March last year, so just over a year ago, Australia was still pretty quiet. The pandemic hadn't really reached us properly. We had our first few cases in the country, and I was getting ready, taking a small group of students, about 25 students, to Germany and Denmark to work with a large multinational organization on a project as a capstone unit in our Bachelor of Information Systems. And of course, as we moved on, 2 weeks later, the world looked completely different, and the whole university had switched from one day to the next into online education. And we were very lucky that at our university, we have been a distance education provider for many, many years. And therefore, we had always a parallel infrastructure for distance education in place. So the switch was a fairly easy one. But of course, looking at a virtual study tour was something that I had never contemplated. And for me, the international experience was a critical component in the promise to our students as a learning outcome for the course that we delivered. And also, I didn't want to let our partner down, who was really looking forward to working with our students and getting access to our students and the exposure to the ideas of our students and vice versa. So we had to rescope the whole work that we were doing to facilitate the experience in a virtual environment. And if I look back now, and I come back to what we did in a minute, looking at how the virtualization of education in Australia fared over the last year was really interesting. We recently had our surveys of student satisfaction coming from the government, and they showed a pretty global drop in student satisfaction across all measures for the last year. So students that graduated were interviewed or were basically given the opportunity to provide feedback in a survey, and they generally didn't appreciate the educational experience as much as they did in previous years, and it dropped by about 10% for the Australian average. Another measure that's been a problem for universities, I think globally, but also particularly in Australia, was student engagement. Student engagement has been a huge challenge for universities, and 57% of students only feel that they are engaged with their degree experience in an appropriate way. And even worse, 76% of students felt that the degree did not really contribute to real-world problem solving. So there are a number of really fascinating challenges that came out of the pandemic and the way we switched our educational experience. But in contrast, at the subject level, we experienced that our students actually were still as satisfied as they were the year before. There was no huge drop at the individual subject level. So somehow something happened between students evaluating their experience in their learning in a subject as compared to the experience in their learning for their whole degree after graduation. And maybe it was the global atmosphere, the lockdowns that we experienced here in Melbourne, or possibly the job situation that some students felt had to manage after graduation that contributed to their satisfaction levels. But in that context, we are now in a position that we have to think about how blended education will actually look going forward, and how we can make an educational system that is blended, where we can leverage some of the efficiencies that we've experienced and some of the learning and educational benefits that students have gained by being more flexible from where they attend, how they attend, and at what times they study, while not losing the benefits of the traditional education that students seem to have loved and appreciated in the past. So now let me get back to my study tour experience. So I had a call with my partner in Europe, and I said, well, we are obviously not going to be able to travel. Our borders are shut. We are not even allowed to leave the country. And we would really want to continue. And my partners in Europe said, well, we actually would still like to continue as well. What's the plan? And we sat down and we thought about all the activities that we were trying to do. And we figured that the project-based work could continue in a virtual environment with facilitators at both ends, where we have facilitation in our university locally with domain experts that could help students work on these projects. And of course, the right sort of facilitation and input from the industry partners that we had in Europe, in Germany, and in Denmark. And we felt that that was manageable, and we thought, let's give that a try. The only downside that we really felt at that point in time was that we couldn't really engage in a social program, because we had really organized a very interesting tourist program, visits to the Mercedes-Benz factory in Stuttgart, the European Parliament in Luxembourg. And we wanted to really make sure that students not just gained an international experience, but also a cultural experience. And in our scoping of what we were doing, the cultural experience became very artificial. We still tried to weave in cultural elements by explaining the context, the location, the demographic of the places that they're currently virtually engaging with, but it wasn't something that students could really engage with, and we couldn't replicate that cultural experience in a purely online environment. The domain-specific experience, the working on the projects, the engagement with the industry partners in different locations, working, interviewing, and developing a solution worked really well. And the online environment in many ways did not have a negative impact at all on the student experience there. And in fact, students really loved the experience. Some students, and this was mentioned by my previous speaker as well, really appreciated the opportunity to participate in a virtual exchange because it took away the hurdle of cost, because we opened up the applications again when we decided that we had to go virtual, and we suddenly had an influx of interested students because they suddenly could participate in what was a European experience without having to pay the airfare and accommodation cost. And that was a huge surprise to us, how much more interest we would actually get. Now that we are looking forward after having completed the last year, we have to think about how do we want to engage going forward. And we really find in order to facilitate a cultural experience, we need to work with partners in other universities where we are placing the virtual exchange, and have other universities work with us to have their cohorts virtually engage with our cohorts. And for that, we need an infrastructure at both ends that provides something along the lines of cognitive spaces, social spaces, teaching spaces in a virtual context where students can engage for different types of activity in different spaces at different points in time. And it's really critical that the social element of what we want to achieve in a virtual exchange is somewhat facilitated, not through the industry partner because they're communicating at a different level, but by collaborating virtually with other students at other universities working on the same international experience with the same framework in the exact same fashion, and being supported locally by academics or support staff as well, that will basically provide the same type of mentorship, feedback, and academic knowledge so that the students can succeed in the project work that we are doing. This will then hopefully give the opportunity for students not just to work as global teams virtually connected, but to not only work successfully for the industry partner, but to gain some possibly insights into our cultures. And maybe we can even dare say form some friendships in a virtual context. Constraints that we face in this context, however, are not to be underestimated. So we have to deal with the organizational constraints where it's really difficult to convince the organizations to come on the journey and be brave enough to experiment with the model that we want to experiment. And also to motivate staff to invest the time and the risk that maybe the experience is not as good as we are hoping. So it's really important to find a model that will work and to find a partner in the overseas environment where we want to work, or multiple partners that are prepared to come on this journey and that are a cultural as well as a structural fit for our university. While we've used Microsoft Teams as an off-the-shelf platform to facilitate what we've done, I do want to mention that software is a challenge. And a lot of universities use Zoom. We're doing what we're doing here today on Zoom. It works reasonably well, but we do need a software solution that allows a more engaging experience than just a video conversation. And software is going to be one of the key battlegrounds in blended education going forward. Hardware infrastructure, luckily we didn't face any problems. Being a virtual or an online education provider, we did have a really good hardware setup that facilitated our infrastructure, and Zoom has also done a lot for a lot of universities around the world to solve that problem. Another real challenge is to have a communication with fellow academics around what does blended education, particularly in internationalization, but more generally mean for the future of them and their work and their positioning. And a lot of colleagues will ask the question, well, if things suddenly go online, does that mean that everything is recorded, and do they still need me? So how does an academic in a blended teaching environment add value? And it is a shift in mindset, and we need to really move our colleagues across from being the single source of knowledge and having a performance-like positioning in terms of a class that they broadcast unidirectionally their knowledge to students, to accept that knowledge can be gained in a lot of different formats in this brave new world where we can really dial into any university and listen to content from millions of academics around the world and choose what we like and what aligns well with us. So we need to understand that the role of the academic is shifting not as the single source of truth or knowledge, but it's actually shifting to becoming a facilitator and a mentor for students to guide them in their learning and point them in the right direction and provide the necessary structure that ultimately leads to accredited assessment. We also need to find a different way to support staff in this global, virtual, possibly blended learning environment, because technology, as trivial as it may sound, is not as trivial when you want to really blend it into a live classroom, when you want to make sure that students at the beginning of the trimester understand the benefits of blended education and familiarize themselves with the technology. So we need to think about maybe new roles that need to come into a blended education model, something that we might label teaching assistants or support staff in that environment. And then most importantly, of course, it is the students, bringing them on the journey with us and making sure that the students appreciate what we are trying to do in this blended education space with the opportunities of a virtual exchange, collaborative work with students in other parts of the world. And we can't just assume that because we call them digital natives and they all spend every making minute of the day on their mobile phones, that they fully understand the technologies that we want them to use and they use them in the right ways. And we need to be cautious to introduce the technologies and the way that we want them to use these technologies so that the experience for the students is going to be a successful outcome and an experience where students after graduation see the value in what we've been doing. In the interest of time, so that we have some more time for discussion, I might stop here and hand back to Professor Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. Again, you touched very crucial aspects of blended education, not only in terms of benefits, but also in terms of problems, challenges, And I think this aspect of, you mentioned, would say, the cultural dimension, that institutions need to adapt, but also professors need to adapt to this, and also students, no, from a cultural perspective. And of course, the challenges in terms of technologies, but also in terms of support, what you mentioned, funding, of course, for all institutions. No? So I think, thank you very much for this. And I would also thank you for keeping within the 10 minutes. I think it's always difficult because you have many interesting things to share, but we all managed to have this 30 minutes presentations. So that we can now move on to the Q&As. No? If I'm not mistaken, there were on the chat there were at least three comments that I will ask COVID people to just to share, to switch on the cameras and to post the questions or comments orally. First was from Nicolas Patriti to Dr. Rao, and then two from Provina Jani, and then a third one, I couldn't identify who was it, but that asked all panelists for more practical tools towards how to implement this. So I would first of all give the floor to Nicolas Patriti, if it's there. No. It was a comment to Dr. Rao. Dr. Rao, you can read it on the chat if you want, and then you can maybe answer or not. The second one was regarding these practical tools. No? It was at the very end from Raikova. This is addressed to all panelists. What practical tips do you have for overcoming challenges in multinational team working? Regarding the student engagement and embedded delivery and pastoral support. I will ask the panelists, maybe they can try to think of practical tools, some tips, in order to address one of these challenges.
I can take the question, which is specifically concerning IIT Delhi. The question is, who is funding the joint PhD program? So we have two joint PhD programs, one with the University of Queensland, and that program is funded partly by industries and partly by our own internal resources. The model here is when the student is with us, so we fund the student. When the student goes to the partner university will support them. In both these programs, the student gets to spend 1 year at the partner university. So that is the model right now. In fact, today morning, we had a large workshop involving industries, and we want at least 2/3 of the students to be supported by industries in this program. And industries are also very active now, because I think when we were offering only an IIT Delhi PhD program, there was a certain amount of funding from the industries. But now that we are partnering with another university, even their expertise comes into picture. So industries, I see now, have a different way of looking at it. So now our industry participation is also going up because of the international program that we have. So in both the cases now, we are expecting at least 2/3 of the students to be funded by the industries, and that is one additional benefit I can see for engineering subjects where IIT Delhi particularly has an interest in engineering subjects. Having a good joint collaboration at the PhD level attracts industry support, I think, which is also an additional benefit I can cite here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Some other tips, practical tools?
I might take that because I can share what we've done and what worked and what didn't work. So overcoming teamwork challenges, I think, is not particular to international experiences. I think that's a challenge for students generally. And in order to engage students in teamwork in a meaningful way, we find transparency is the key. So that we can provide students with a lot of information around who is responsible for what as their contribution to the team, and give the responsibility to students individually to make it something that they are accountable for. And that seems to work really well. Student engagement in blended delivery, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we have, because we all would have experienced a video lecture or video tutorial that we are running, where most of the students have their cameras switched off and they're listening in the background. And when you ask a question, you get a really eerie silence. And if you're trying to address the students directly, sometimes you're not even sure if they're there or if they just logged in and went to the pub or somewhere else. COVID times would probably have not been the pub, but anyway. Engagement in an online space is much more challenging. And the only way that we can help that along is by creating expectations and a culture of active participation. So we are trying to encourage our students to have their cameras switched on. We are trying to have our students participate in the class by asking to us in the class, to present themselves in the class, to set some standards around the expectations that we have in the students' online interaction. And we are making progress, but I would argue that engagement remains the biggest challenge in the blended education space. Pastoral support, I find really interesting. I would say the hurdle has dropped in terms of students engaging with us as academics, and they find us more approachable in the online space. So I'm finding that in our infrastructure that we use, which is Microsoft Teams, students are much more happy to chat to me and actually open up about problems that they have, because it's a more informal communication environment. And it allows me to interact with them in a lot less bureaucratic ways and potentially remove obstacles much quicker. I've also adopted in my teamwork environment the agile principle of stand-up meetings. When I catch up with groups and I want to talk to them about what they've done and what they need to do as part of the project, I actually get them to do a stand-up meeting where they report back on what they did, what they're planning to do, and what obstacles they face. And I find that really informative, and it allows me to get on top of problems very quickly. It's a very simple tool. It does cost me 5 minutes at the beginning of a session, but it actually provides a lot of useful information and adds to the transparency that I was talking about at the beginning. Thank you.
Just to slightly add briefly, I tapped it in the chat as well, just in case, but at least from the virtual exchange perspective, really the most practical thing that instructors can do is talk to each other. I know it sounds very simple, but it is so important to sit down and work out the details and try to visualize what the project would look like and provide instructions to students. Many professors like the more non-structured environment and for things to happen organically, and that is beautiful. And some of that should happen in a virtual environment, because that's part of the beauty of those type of collaborations. But also for some students, this is maybe the first time that they're finding themselves in a virtual room with students they've never met. So helping them, giving them clear expectations, clear instructions for each activity actually is a helpful tool to help them succeed in this type of projects.
I just was trying to ask you, in terms of numbers and students, we talk about the VCOI, these experiences that you talked about from in the US, in order to make it possible that it works. What would you recommend in terms of tips in terms of numbers of students? Which are the groups that you normally have in these courses?
So at DePaul, our classes tend to be relatively small. So we usually have groups of about 20 to 30 students on our end, and oftentimes similar numbers on the other end. But that's not to say that these projects cannot be done in larger groups. So our largest one has been about 100 students. And it just involved splitting the groups. There were more groups of students collaborating, so it was a bit more challenging, of course. We haven't had experience with larger classes than that, because most of ours are relatively small. And in that environment, it looks great. One thing we do recommend, regardless of the class size, is always group students to allow at least 2 students from each institution in the group. So in case something happens and one of the students drops out, the group can still continue to talk. So 2 students at least on each side per group. It's a great strategy to build these, but class size shouldn't stop you. It can be done in a small class, it can be done in a large class.
Okay, thank you. There was I would say, a very general question regarding pedagogy. What pedagogy should different institutions across the globe should adopt to have virtual exchange with desired institutions? I know if the audience can they activate the micros? What was the intention of this?
Thank you, Dr. Marcus. And I would like to thank all the eminent speakers and participants for joining us for track 3. I would now hand over the session to Ms. Shweta for active break session.
A beautiful welcome to all of you. So we know that we have digital eye strain. Exercise, like for eye exercises, relaxes your eyes and also your body. So let me tell you, we'll be doing 2 minutes of eye exercises and repeat, or I'll say, do it with me. So first of all, be ready and remove your glasses if you're wearing any. Beautiful. I hope you are following me. So we'll be going for 6 exercises related to eyes, and we'll do it every exercise for 2 times. So please join me and do it along with me. So the first comes, wide open your eyes and shut them tight. Once more, wide open the eyes and shut them tight. I hope everybody is following with me and relaxing their eyes as well. Now blink, blink a little, blink and blink. Lovely. Now we'll do eye up and down. One more time with me. Up and down. Now go right and left. Try not to move your neck. Right and left. Wonderful. Now we'll go diagonal. See, right diagonal and left. Right diagonal and left. Keep your neck steady. Go other side. Left diagonal up and left diagonal down. One more time. Left diagonal up and left diagonal down. Now here comes the round and round. So we'll be moving our eyeballs to anti-clockwise and clockwise. So follow with me and join me and do this. So we are rounding it up and the other side. Wow, I can feel the relaxation. Hope you too. So keep on doing these exercises after every 1 hour of your screen test. So this is it from my side. Hope you did it and enjoy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shweta.